NFL Week 7, the first week of major buys on the NFL season that I felt anyway, for sure. I had a lot of lineups this week as I went in to set them, and I was like, yeah, why is all my guys unavailable? They were all on bye. That is what can happen, but there's a lot of teams out there, I'm sure, were wishing that they had CeeDee Lamb in their lineup this week, but he will be back for week 8 as we will be fastly approaching that, so do not be concerned. Sean Siegel is still on his travels. I hope he's having a fantastic time. We did our recap last week with Sean on location. We are joined today by Erik Hove. Erik writing up on rotoviz.com, but also managing some leagues along with Sean that Sean will bring up on the show from time to time to say about what Erik's in-season advice has been, maybe that he has felt the need to share with the RotoViz OT audience. So I'm excited to have Erik on. We're going to talk through my thoughts on week 7, his thoughts on week 7, and where that leads us towards the rest of the NFL season. So Erik, welcome on to RotoViz OT. What's your feeling on how week 7 went before I corrupt your thoughts on how it all went?
It was a wild and exciting slate. Yeah, especially the 1 p.m. games. It seemed like every game I was tuning into and watching was going the opposite that I had expected. So it was cool to see some surprise finishes and some underdogs win. I think from a fantasy perspective, I think it was a week of elite QB and elite tight end. They both really separated from the field this week. At QB, Mahomes and Lamar had 34 points each. Allen with 24, Hurts with 23. And we were chatting earlier. No other QB that was drafted typically had above 20 points. Unfortunately, Colm was saying he was in a super flex league and went against Minshew and Tyrod Taylor. So that was not true for you, but for everybody else, the elite QBs separated. And same with tight ends. I mean, Kelce, just a monster game. I should have put tight end premium scores on here, but he scored 36 in PPR, Waller 23, Andrews 22, Goedert 19. So, elite QB and elite tight end was the story of the day for me.
Yeah, when you get into PPR leagues where, Travis Kelce is 36 points, and then you think of adding half a point on for every one of the receptions in tight end premium leagues, it really is wonderful to have guys like that on your roster if that was the option that was available. So we are going to talk through kind of focusing on those elite quarterbacks on today's show. And obviously the elite quarterbacks, the reason that some of those put up the points that they did this week is because they're paired with those elite tight ends. So we do have Mahomes, Kelce, we have Lamar, Andrews. So we will jump into those games. And I think starting off with KC might be the way to go. But I've mentioned on a few shows recently how impressed I have been with Lamar Jackson this season and how he has gone, and maybe how the stats haven't been fully there to back it up. So I felt like KC was the way to go, but I'm going to change it up here. We're going to go with the Baltimore Ravens and the Detroit Lions. This was a game where when the game kicks off, I'm thinking Jared Goff's road splits aren't great, and it can be a situation where I'm starting him. There's a few places today where I kind of dropped him out a little bit, and he does finish this one with 284 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception, but they were getting absolutely crushed here early by the Baltimore Ravens. It's 28-0 at halftime, goes up to 31-0 before the Lions get those 6 points in the fourth quarter. A real demolition by the Baltimore Ravens. And I have to say that more so than on the Detroit Lions, I think this is a game where you have to give basically sole credit to the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson, though, the player that I wanted to highlight at the start, a couple of weeks ago has the game where there's a massive drop issues across the entire team. And I did get reminded on a YouTube comment, I did say that they weren't, all his tight end, Mark Andrews' fault. But what I should have said is some of them were his fault. I got called out that Andrews did have drops in that game. But Andrews was fantastic in this game. Only has 4 receptions, 6 targets, but he does get the 2 touchdowns, 63 yards. But, being paired with Jackson, who is spreading the ball around, 357 yards in the air, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions off 27 attempts. And then he has 36 on the ground for another touchdown. And he just looked fantastic here. The composure is something I don't think we've seen as much from him in the past that we're seeing here, particularly on the touchdown to Nelson Aguilar. I think Lamar Jackson, 1 season, 2 seasons ago, is ready to take off and try and scramble for the end zone himself. It's a 12-yard pass, but stays in there and waits, and it opens up and gets the pass. And also, we've seen him do it a few times with the Second touchdown to Travis Kelce, where he's kind of scrambling, but it's almost like a fake scramble, and then he tosses it over the top of the defense once they lose sight of Andrew. So I have to say a lot of positives in this, but a huge amount of the work going the way of the points for Andrews. Rashad Bateman not really involved. 3 targets, 2 receptions, 36 yards for him. Beckham, though, has 7 targets, 5 receptions, 49 yards. Zay Flowers, somebody who we've talked a lot about here on OT, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 75 yards. The positive is that we are starting to see the targets field as well for him, as well as the shorter targets. He does have a long completion in this of 46 yards. So I think we have to, just give all the credit in the world here to the Ravens. On the other side, Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously the lead back for the Ravens, or for the Lions in this game, 11 carries, 68 yards, 1 touchdown. Does get 10 targets, 9 catches, 58 yards in the passing game, as they are in pretty much catch-up mode the whole way. LaPorta 6 for 52. Amon Ra, I guess the bright spot, if you are playing him in your fantasy league, you're quite happy with the 19 targets, 13 receptions, 102 yards. So a lot of fantasy production for the pieces. Like there's a lot of players in this that people would have started this week who either really helped their lineup or did not destroy their chances of winning, but I think Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews have to do the big takeaway here.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was utter domination from the start, and I think we Rotoviz and thinking about fantasy football are usually concerned about the skill players and the quarterbacks, but in this game, it just seemed like it was line domination on both sides by the Ravens. They were just all over Jared Goff all day, and Lamar, especially early, just seemed to have all the time in the world. And then when you give him that, and he has his scrambling ability, it's certainly hard to counter. I appreciate Dan Campbell and his aggressiveness. I think that was what salvaged the fantasy days for Amon Ra and Gibbs. He was, going forward on 4th down multiple times around the 50-yard line, and they were still slinging it around. So from a fantasy perspective, he certainly was friendly to us today.
Yeah, that was one of my game as the game really got out of hand at the half, and then you're getting into the third quarter and it's not turning around. My fear was that they, pull all the starters. Next thing, Amon Ra's not in there, Sam LaPorta's not in there. I think Gibbs kind of had to be in there because they didn't have a huge amount of
right.
alternative options. They do have Craig Reynolds with 3 carries in this, but it has been built around Jahmyr Gibbs here with the absence of David Montgomery. So I was appreciative if the Dan Campbell kept fighting in this one. I think, I mentioned the home road splits at the start. We've seen them go into Green Bay, beat the Packers. That might not be that much of a challenge with how the Packers played this weekend, but they also went to Kansas City and bet the Chiefs on the road. So there is that narrative around the home road splits, but I do think the Lions up until this point had been a little bit better this year. They obviously had the win on the road last week as well against the Buccaneers. So a little bit more of a balance because they're 3-1 away on the season, and that home road split is mainly around Goff's fantasy output. But there'll be brighter weeks. I think this is more of a one-off game where if you have Amon Ra, if you have Sam LaPorta, if you have Gibbs, you're kind of just grateful that they got points this week to get you through a 6-point performance for an offense is usually not going to lead to the points that those guys got. So that is a positive. When we look then, the game I was going to start with, we'll bounce into that because another elite tight end performance in this one, and that was the situation around the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes at halftime in this game was on course to multiple potential records, but they did slow down in that third and fourth quarter. This game in the first half, was 17-24 in favor of the Chiefs. No points for either team in the third quarter, and only the touchdown for the Kansas City Chiefs in the fourth quarter. So no second half points for the Chargers in this game. They are now 2-4 in the season. The Chiefs go to 6-1 with that lone loss to Detroit, the only one behind them. But 424 passing yards to Patrick Mahomes, 32 of 42, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. Running game kind of not existent for the Chiefs in this, but they were really doing everything through the pass. Just the 21 total rush attempts in it for 68 yards on the ground. Travis Kelce, though, who needs a run game when you get 13 targets, 12 receptions, 179 yards and a touchdown? And the one incompletion, I'm sure Kelce will probably say that he should have caught it. It's kind of a difficult catch as he goes to the ground, but almost a 100%, pass reception, I guess, pass completion going the way of Patrick Mahomes in this one. But I think Kelce is. I've always said Gronk was the best fantasy tight end of all time. We are getting some pressure here, I think, from Travis Kelce as he continues to put up huge numbers with Patrick Mahomes. And the other player to really highlight in this one, I think, is Rashee Rice. He gets 6 targets, 5 receptions, 60 yards, 1 touchdown. Again, we're starting to see him with more downfield targets, has a 37-yard reception in this game and gets in the end zone again. We're seeing Mahomes look for him. As a rookie at this point in the season, I think there's huge potential there with him moving forward. The other touchdowns going to Pacheco through the air and also MBS on a slightly broken play, I would say. But yeah, I think everyone knows about Travis Kelce, but this was a next level. And then Rashee Rice. Have you been? Are you a Rashee Rice truther like myself and Sean?
Yes, I'm certainly a truther. I will say, Sean and I on one of our leagues, we were debating Wandale versus Rashee Rice. He obviously with his travels left it to me. I had noticed he put Wandale in there, and I was like, "Oh man, I don't know which way to go." And I left Wandale in there, so of course I got 3 points versus the I think 17 that Rice put up. So thankfully we I think are going to pull out the W in that league. But yeah, he looks good. I mean, he's big, fast. I mean, the thing about Rice for me is every time he catches the ball, it seems like he's downhill and just beelining toward the end zone, which I greatly appreciate.
And I do think for people now moving forward, I think are going to have that decision, like you mentioned. They've drafted him. Maybe they've listened to the show. They've drafted him. They've picked him up. They have him on the roster, whether it's a dynasty or whether it's a redraft league. And then you're looking at the decisions, especially in a bye week. The 1v1s, or is there a veteran that's not performing? Over these last couple of weeks, we're looking at 6 targets, 4, 5, 5, 7. Even in week 1, had 5 targets. So outside of week 2, where there's 2 targets, we're above 4 on all occasions. And then we're starting to get the yards. We have 5 receptions, 64 for 72, 4 for 33. Obviously not ideal, but you get a touchdown in there. So we're looking at pretty positive starts through those opening weeks of the start of his NFL career, where it's 26 receptions, 305 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So we're starting to move in a positive direction. And the real positive for me is these last 2 weeks. He has a 28-yard reception last week and a 37-yard one this week. So we're starting to look at those plays coming in. And, if you're looking at downfield plays and teams that aren't afraid to take those shots, nobody really does it more than they.
Yep. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and he, I saw today, I think he ran the 3rd most routes for the Chiefs. And it just seems like, I mean, some of it's just the function of being Kansas City and Andy Reid, the play caller, but like he does not seem to have I wouldn't say not difficult catches, but like he always has a few yards of separation when the ball gets thrown to him. So I do think he'll have a pretty high catch rate. And both those long receptions you called out kind of had one guy left to beat, and he would have had an even longer TD catch. So I think there's even more upside there.
Yeah, I mentioned Travis Kelce. There's nothing else to say, but is there anything else to say?
Man, I don't think so. I think, I mean, just you talking about the overall stat line. I mean, I think he was 8 for 143 and a touchdown at halftime. The Chiefs were absolutely cooking, and that was with a pretty long field goal drive to start the game that kind of ate up a lot of the clock. So, yeah, it was a fun game. Definitely one that was a tale of 2 halves a little bit. The first half was very explosive. Second half slowed down a bit. But yeah, Kelce was definitely the big story. I think the one guy that was kind of MIA was really the whole Charger offense, but I was surprised that Austin Ekeler didn't get going a little more, especially in the passing game. He was not very involved.
That was what I was going to mention for you. The other one was, Quentin Johnson, again, not really involved. We had Mike Williams obviously having the injury, and we thought we would start to see him get added in there. 2 targets, 1 reception, 20 yards. Always somebody who was going to be a project, as he come into the NFL, but surprised at how little been used there. We do see 7 targets for Joshua Palmer for 5 receptions, 133 yards. He leads the way for the Chargers. And I have to say, I'm a big Josh Palmer fan, but I was incredibly impressed by some of these receptions that he made in this game. So I can't really argue the thing of, Quentin Johnson over Palmer, for example. If it's rest of the season, I would probably rather have Palmer in there. As tough as that is for me to say, we get a Gerald Everett touchdown in the end zone. We get 9 targets for Keenan Allen, but just 4 for 55. Sometimes when we have these interdivisional matches where they, know each other, play each other a little bit more regular, you do see some things where you can scheme players out of it. But obviously the Chargers did not do that to Travis Kelce, for example. But a little bit of that going from the Chiefs side to stop Keenan Allen. And Austin Ekeler, only 2 targets, 1 reception for 1 yard, and then 14 carries for 45. Joshua Kelly breaks off a 14-yard touchdown run in this game. So there was some success in the running game here for the Chargers. But overall, I was very, very surprised to see Ekeler held kind of that much in check. Do you think for Ekeler, it's just a case of, working his way back into game shape and a little, like, I can't really say that it was game script because he's kind of game script proof, but he just was not. I was really surprised today not being used in the passing game more than he was.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and obviously the 2 targets shows that it was not fluky plays. It just was him not getting targeted very much. Kansas City's defense, I think, is pretty sneaky good and underrated. They had a lot of batted balls on Herbert. But yeah, I would have thought that getting Ekeler involved in the screen game would have been a nice go-to. So I think it probably was just easing him in. I think he, kind of got unfortunate with Josh Kelly getting the big long TD run. Where the line just kind of opened the seas and Kelly ran through and Ekeler didn't get that TD. But yeah, I think better days to come for Ekeler. I didn't notice anything popping out about his game play or the Chargers overall to limit him.
Then we go back to our conversation around the elite quarterback play, and people would say borderline elite maybe on the Tua side, but was comparatively, when you're looking at prices and ADP from preseason, where you were getting the likes of a Jalen Hurts versus a Tua, the scoring from Tua has been at a very discounted level comparatively. But I would have, if we're drafting right now and that elite level of quarterback, but Jalen Hurts stole the show. 31-17. They go to 6-1, 5-2 now with the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins sometimes have a little bit of trouble, I think, when you face off against these elite oppositions, and the Philadelphia defense is a tough go at any point. I was surprised from both sides here just how little the run games were actually involved in it. So we get 99 total yards rushing for the Eagles on 34 plays, but they do get 2 touchdowns based off that. Then on the other side is 12 for 45 for the Miami Dolphins. So really not much happening here in the rushing game. And in terms of what was put up fantasy points wise, this game was really done through efficiency from some of the star players. So AJ Brown has 15 targets, 10 receptions, 137 yards, 1 touchdown. We get Dallas Goedert, 5 targets, 5 receptions, 71 and 1. We're still seeing Smith kind of on the periphery of the offense, 5 targets, 4 receptions, and the 49 yards. I would like to see him get a little bit more focus there, but just 3 targets, 3 receptions, 13 for Swift. Swift with the 15 carries for 62. We obviously know what can happen on 4th down when you have Jalen Hurts and the offensive line of the Eagles. I know myself and Sean have kind of joked about it for a while, but people talking about the play and, should it be illegal? Well, we've seen other teams try it. Nobody else can really do it at all. Not even like other teams are having success. It's like, every single time it's automatic for the Eagles, but nobody else can do it. So we've seen multiple times in this one, 4th down. And again, you mentioned the Lions, they continue to try and play, and they were aggressive, and by the point that they were so far out of it that they kept playing. But when you're being aggressive as a play caller like the Eagles are here, and every time they get into a 4th down situation, they're going for it. It's, I think, and again, what you want to see is teams like the Eagles and the Dolphins with the plays that they have been running, some of the more innovative stuff. That's going to change the way the NFL is looking at these things if they continue to have success and people using all 4 downs to try and move the ball rather than being very, very conservative in those situations. So Jalen Hurts with an impressive performance. AJ Brown with a dominant performance on his side. In terms of what he has done over the last couple of weeks of the season, that was his 5th straight game with 125 or more yards. He now ties the longest streak in NFL history with Calvin Johnson in 2012 and Pat Studstill back in 1966. So just exceptional stuff that he has done. 3 touchdowns in that time frame. Basically putting up, season-long yardage totals in the last 5 games for what most people would do in a whole season and be pretty happy with it. So I'll get your thoughts on AJ Brown. On the other side, Tyreek Hill is doing stuff similar to AJ Brown. He gets 15 targets as well. He gets 11 receptions, 88 yards, and a touchdown on an absolutely, a beautiful throw by Tua. People talk about his deep ball. that was a really special throw and a nice catch. And I have to give props to the Dolphins on their celebrations here. They do the catching a fish celebration, which was impressive choreography, but didn't get the result overall that they wanted. Mostert 45 yards for him on 9 carries, doesn't really get a huge amount going, and then we got just 1 reception for 6 yards in the passing game. So this was pretty much Hill and Waddle and nothing else for the Dolphins in this game. So they had a lot of players who I know myself and other people would have in their lineups that really may have prevented wins this week. So what are your thoughts here? And 2 of the higher powered offenses, I guess being so concentrated in one way, but also it's good to be concentrated, but it's also not good when the points don't come for some of the star running backs here.
Yeah,
That's what I've turned into.
Game.
I've turned into a running backs truther. I never thought I'd see that.
Give us the running back points. Yeah, and it was a fun game. It was awesome to have those 2 juggernauts squaring off in prime time. Yeah, for me, A.J. Brown was one of the huge stories. I'm glad you finally said it. I've been saying it for months and months that A.J. Brown's the next Pat Studstill. So I make that comp all the time. But yeah, just
I don't know if Studstill. I don't know if we can get the data for Studstill in the Rotoviz tools, can we? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I got 40 times. I got everything for Studstill. I'll hit you up after the show.
Okay.
But, yeah, but what he's been doing has been remarkable, and he just has a great combination of, just being the grown man that he is, but he seems to catch every long bomb that Hurts throws to him, but then he also is their go-to, like on those quick slants to get 5 or 6 yards, and that adds up pretty quick in PPR.
I think something that doesn't get talked about enough of them is like the physicality. Like he is. You mentioned, he's a grown-ass man, basically. His physicality at the point of contact, but also his acceleration. And then if it's a deep ball, the speed he has to beat defenders as well on those deep passes. And his hands, the one thing I don't like taking positives and then hitting on somebody else, but the Titans' decision to move on from A.J. Brown just looks worse. But the one thing I will say is, thankfully, the Eagles made that trade because we don't get this. We got A.J. Brown in a certain way when he was with the Titans. We got to see big plays. We got to see yards after the catch. We didn't see this evolution of A.J. Brown was not happening with the Titans. So shout out to the Eagles for making that trade happen.
Yes, certainly. I'm glad that we've gotten to see it. But yeah, I think, like you said, I think, both teams, I don't think any, really worrisome signs from this other than the Dolphins just could not run against the Eagles. So I don't know if that was just a matter of this day. I know the broadcast had mentioned they had some offensive linemen out. So I don't know if that's the main cause, but made Miami pretty one-dimensional, which, one-dimensional Miami is still a pretty good team. Tyreek was still cooking and looked great, but it just wasn't quite enough. They just seemed to be kind of a half step behind Philly the whole time. Sirianni in particular, just his aggressive play calling. There were a few kind of backbreaking plays. He had, I think he went for it on 4th and 3 from the 33, and Hurts had just an amazing, scramble rollout, hit A.J. Brown. It would have been another TD. I think he went down on like the half-yard line.
That was one that I meant to mention. That's a good catch. Was the he went down pretty much. I think it was called a touchdown originally, and then it was marked down at the 1. Basically, his butt came down before he got over the line, and I wonder, and like when Jalen Hurts is waiting for that play call to come in every time the ball's at the 1 yard line, is there, is it just a case of does he have to listen to the play call, or is it just going to be a free rushing touchdown from each time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I got a lot of DeAndre Swift, and I would love a Swift run at the goal line, but I don't think it's going to happen when that play works every time.
And it's also a case of like with some teams, you get down at the 1 and it's like, well, maybe they will pass it here. Like maybe they'll be aggressive and pass it. So maybe, A.J. Brown gets a chance to get into the end zone. But with the Eagles, is just no doubt we're getting Jalen Hurts here to push this one over the line. And it has been quite fortuitous with some of those very short rushing touchdowns. But if you're a Jalen Hurts drafter, a manager, you're just loving those particular moments as they continue to push home that advantage. Dallas Goedert over the last couple of weeks has kind of started to be more of a factor in this offense. Anything you from him, or are you is he somebody you think like he was right on the fringe of that elite tight end group? Kind of in the 6 through 8 range usually in terms of where he would be drafted by ADP. But over the last couple of weeks, 5 targets, 8 targets, 9 targets. We're getting in the end zone twice on those. We had the game against the Rams where he's 117 yards. I mentioned I would like to see DeVonta Smith factored in a little bit more, but I think from the Eagles' perspective, if you're working in getting what AJ Brown's doing, and also now it's the defense has to really decide, are they trying to take away the tight end or are they taking away DeVonta Smith? And I think the way the Eagles are probably setting up is that they're just going to take whatever option is available on that day.
Yep. No, I think that's exactly right. And Goedert, I mean, he looks good. He's a great player. He's not like, going downfield and mossing guys or anything like that. It's mostly, kind of screen game, short, little outs. But he's quick, and obviously the whole Eagles team is just, very physical, big, and get downfield and blocking. And so he's been having, a lot of lanes the last few weeks to run. I have a lot of Dallas Goedert. I can't say it was a great targeted approach. It just seemed like he always is kind of there in that range where wide receivers are dried up and you're kind of staring at an ugly board, and love playing the elite tight end in best ball. So I'm thankful for it. It's been a big change. I mean, after the first 3 or 4 weeks, I would have said the exact opposite, that he's been a bust. So it's nice to see him come back to life.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I always say to people, particularly in a basketball environment, is like, when you're 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks into the season, even when we're 6 or 7, and there's so much that will change between now and the end of the season. And I know if you're playing basketball, you need to be accumulating them points all the way through. But a couple of those big weeks where people, have a tight end has a 100-yard game, like tight ends aren't doing that. So 100 yards and a touchdown can really catapult a team up with that singular position. So let's see what he does moving forward. But I think people who were heavily targeting him this offseason, I think maybe the last couple of weeks is what we were expecting. People who were avoiding him the first few weeks, they probably thought they had made the right decision. So we'll see who's right come the end of the season now as it plays out. 2 more games to rapid fire go through on today's edition of the show. The Patriots get a win over the Buffalo Bills. I don't think a lot of people were probably thinking that one was coming. The second one of the season for the Patriots, now 2-5. We get the Bills to 4-3. I think the Bills have a lot of issues that, I would have seen this at times with the Packers when we had Aaron Rodgers, that you had so much talent at the quarterback position that kind of everything else was kind of, you think it's going to fall into place. Whereas we see the other teams we've talked about today so far, and like the Eagles and the Chiefs, where I think there's so much focus on also not making mistakes. And that's one of the things I would say Mahomes does from time to time a little bit much is, take those chances downfield and make mistakes. We're seeing Josh Allen continue to turn the ball over. Had a nice fantasy day, as you mentioned at the start of the show, but just a little bit too inconsistent for this team in terms of where the points are being put up. Mac Jones gets his first game-winning drive since his rookie season. Not a huge amount to talk about in this. Again, like we've talked about a few times in this, we had players this week who had good performances, not blow-away performance. Like we get Diggs again, 12 targets, 6 receptions, 58 yards and a touchdown. If you have that in your lineup, you're going to be pretty happy with Diggs' outcome. Even the likes of Kendrick Bourne, who I think has continued to look pretty good in the games the Patriots have looked pretty good. He gets 7 targets, 6 receptions, 63 and 1. Not a huge amount else on the Patriots side. But the one thing I did want to call out, we get the touchdown carry for Elliott. He gets the touchdown there. Rhamondre, Stevenson and him splitting time, but we do get 11 carries for Elliott, just the 9 for Stevenson. And then Stevenson, though, in the passing game, 6 targets, 6 receptions, 51 yards. And I have to say, on that final drive where they get down the field, get that touchdown to win the game, to put them ahead at that point, a lot of that on the back of Stevenson, who is a nice kind of pass out of the backfield, shows his athleticism down the sideline. So I think Stevenson's box score here, not outstanding, but I was still impressed with how he has played again. And we're seeing some of these running backs who the numbers are just not popping for them at the moment, but I am starting to see some better play in terms of what they're doing on tape in some of these games. Kincaid, though, the most involved we've seen him as a rookie, 8 targets, 8 receptions, 75 yards for him. So nothing hugely exciting, but the Patriots get a win in an exciting fashion at the end. And then we get, we talked about celebration with Tyreek Hill earlier. We get a number of the worst gritty dance celebrations I think we've ever seen. As Gesicki gets the touchdown, we see his attempt of it that he has done for quite some time. And then we see Mac Jones with, I think I might be able to beat what Mac Jones was doing there, but we'll not do that on the podcast today. The other game that I was going to mention was the Chicago Bears 30, Raiders 12. Raiders 3-4 in the season, Bears 2-5. Kind of an ugly game all around. We get Brian Hoyer starting this one. We get Aidan O'Connell coming in. 3 total interceptions between the 2 quarterbacks there. 1 touchdown by Aidan O'Connell. Nothing really in the running game. Davante Adams was getting work early. Finishes with 12 targets with 7 for 57. Jakobi Meyers, again, a little bit like I was saying about Kendrick Bourne. Meyers has been somebody that I've been very impressed with. We did some of the underdog resurrection drafts recently. We were targeting Meyers. 13 targets going his way, 7 receptions, 50, and a touchdown. He continues to look good there. There was a chance of a Josh Jacobs touchdown that did get turned over via penalty. So that would have helped his manager's days, but obviously disappointing all around there. The player, though, that we have to talk about here is a long-time kind of favorite of the RotoViz community, but has had a huge amount of injuries in his career. 16 carries, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground for Dante Foreman, and then in the air, 5 targets, 3 receptions, 31 yards, and a touchdown. Just tremendous stuff from a veteran running back who has had a lot of issues, basically putting the team on his back and winning this one. We did have Tyson Bagent get, look, he gets the win. I think a lot of this is down to Dante Foreman.
Yep. No, I totally agree. Yeah, Foreman looked great. It was fun to see him playing well. Always root for him, and it was truck stick after truck stick. Not amazing speed, but just very physical and a ton of yards after contact there. Once again, talking about
very physical is a very good way to say it. Yeah, very physical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And again, just to the kind of best ball mindset. I mean, he's a guy that, after a few weeks, you're thinking, man, that's just a total wasted pick, being inactive certain games behind Herbert and Roshan. But here you go, got a 33-point game right here from Foreman, and that's certainly all you need. So yeah, he looked good. Bagent, he definitely had some moxie moving the offense. Pretty cool story for a undrafted rookie to get a win for a team that has very few over the last year. But yeah, I don't think with him at the helm, there's going to be a lot of fantasy production outside of potentially the running backs. So but overall, I was surprised to see Las Vegas struggle so much. Want to echo the comments on Jakobi Meyers. He certainly has impressed me and surprised me this year. I didn't do a ton of resurrection drafts, but the handful that I did, I think I've got Meyers on like all but one. It just seemed like easy money to take him. He definitely is looking elite in like a clear kind of 1B to Adams.
Yeah, it feels like they're going to be behind in a lot of these games moving forward with how things have transpired so far this season. So in that game script where you're getting a lot of targets as well as they try and come back in, always favorable to players who are getting those targets, obviously, and Meyers and Adams are going to be the 2 main guys, getting the contributions there from whoever the quarterback is with the Raiders. Any thoughts on anything coming out of the Patriots Bills?
Yeah, no, I had kind of same thought on that game-winning drive. Rhamondre looked great. He definitely was the engine of the offense on that drive. He had a really nice reception down the right sideline where I think he made 2 or 3 guys miss and got them into what would be field goal range, and eventually they got down there and actually scored. But yeah, I thought Mac Jones overall this year, I mean, he's been very up and down. I think the discourse on him has probably been a little too negative. He certainly has had some plays that have been really great. But yeah, a few of his kind of late game attempts at heroics have fallen short from drops and penalties and things like that. So I think he at least is giving them a chance to be in these games. I think probably the highlight of that game was actually Diggs' touchdown was pretty fun. He kind of caught the ball sliding down. Nobody touched him. He got back up and juked around 2 guys. So I had to watch that a couple times to realize that he actually got away unscathed and got into the end zone. So it was pretty fun play.
That was a real heads up play for anyone that hasn't checked it out. Try and check it out. It is a case where reception defender's pretty close by, but his knee's obviously down, but he's not down by contact, so he makes his way back up. A very heads up play. I think you do see situations around the league where people don't make heads up plays all the time. We're going to talk about them on the second show. Quite a number of them happening this weekend, but very heads up play by Diggs. Diggs kind of has this little thing where he can make defenders when they really shouldn't. We've seen that in the game when they faced Miami a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, did get in the end zone there on that occasion. The other thing I was going to mention when we're talking about the Raiders game, Davante Adams has a chance as well at the kind of corner of the end zone to make a catch. A difficult catch, but for somebody of Davante Adams's capabilities, I think he probably should have hauled that one in for a touchdown as well. So we had a few kind of near touchdowns for the Raiders that could have made that look slightly different as the final outcome was. But that is going to do it for this edition of RotoViz Overtime. As I mentioned at the start, joined by Erik Hove. Check Erik out on Twitter at Erik Hove2. That's Erik with a K. Obviously, I'm sure, Erik, there's going to be stuff coming to RotoViz we'll open it up wide over the next 12 months at some point.
Yes, that sounds good. Yeah, I'm excited to get a few more articles on the site. Between the career and family, got a little slow on the article rollout, but I have a few fun ideas for either later in the season or the off season, getting into best ball for next year.
Yeah, and the best ball, obviously, the stuff that you did this year, must read. Definitely check that out. I will link to it in the show notes today, but also best ball just growing so much. I mentioned like the in-season best ball with Underdog and the Resurrection and loads of stuff like that. It just is expanding and expanding, and using the tools on the site and diving in and then being able to read articles from people like yourself, Sean, Blair, the whole crew. I would highly recommend that to anyone listening in that hasn't checked it out already. You can sign up over at RotoViz for an NFL pass to get access to all the content and tools. You can use the code RVRadio2023 at checkout. That'll give you access to everything over there. My name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at @OverTimeIreland. And as I mentioned, my co-host today, Erik Hove, he will be back for the next edition. It will come out on Tuesday, but if you are subscribed to the RotoViz Overtime podcast feed, you might get that pretty early on Tuesday as we continue to recap the week's action. So don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button. And until we are back, have a good one.